Good evening, matadors and friends. I am Chandra Subramaniam, the Dean of the David Nazarian College of Business and Economics at CSUN. It is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you to the Eunice and Soraya Nazarian Center for the Performing Arts. I'm certain this will be a fascinating and thought-provoking program on the workforce of the future. I extend that welcome on behalf of the president of CSUN, Dr. Diane Harrison. Dr. Harrison very much wanted to be here today to deliver this welcome. She has repeatedly expressed enthusiasm and excitement at having this event at our campus. Unfortunately, she's in Long Beach for the board meeting of the CSU system. We are deeply grateful for her leadership, her support, and her recognition of the imminent challenges which face all colleges and universities as we prepare students for the workforce of the future. First and foremost, I would like to welcome our presenters and panelists for being willing to take time from their busy schedules to be here. This event would not have been successful if not for Steve Canepa, Managing Director and General Manager of IBM's Global Communications, Media and Entertainment Industry Business, and a member of the David Nazarian College of Business and Economics. Carl Karande, Global Co-Chair of the KPMG Advisory Services. Our panelists include Utpal Mangla, George Kreitler, Luca Marchi from IBM, Dr. Arvind Sathi, and Bindya Kurana from KPMG. I will introduce them again later. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome those in attendance here for their support of this unique and critically important program. Dr. Stella Theodoulou, Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dr. Hamid Johari, Dean of the College of Engineering and Computer Science. I don't see Dr. Yan Searcy, Dean of the College of Social and Behavioral Science. Dr. William Watkins, Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students. Hilary Baker, our Vice President for Information Technology and CIO, is off fighting a fire close to her house. And members of the advisory board, alumni, department chairs, faculty, staff, and students. Thank you all for your support. Given this grand audience, no dean should forego this wonderful opportunity to highlight some of the many accomplishments of the David Nazarian College of Business and Economics. These accomplishments cannot be achieved without the dedicated and supportive faculty, staff, and students. These are exciting times for the Nazarian College, and without taking too much time away from the program, allow me to cite just a very few examples of the energy, innovation, and sense of mission and purpose that drives our college. We have more than 7,000 students in the Nazarian College, which makes us the second largest college of business in California and the 9th largest in the US. We are known for our ethnically diverse, hardworking, and technically competent students. More than half of our students are first-generation college seekers, and more than half receive Pell Grants. The high quality of the program is well known in Southern California, given CSUN's business alumni are disproportionately represented at the partner level in public accounting and at the CFO level in the industry. Notwithstanding that, our students also understand what it is to give back. This tax season, the students volunteered more than 20,000 hours for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program to help more than 7,500 low-income individuals and brought back more than $11 million to the community through tax refunds and earned income tax credits, creating a significant economic impact in the Valley. The size of our student participation and the low-income individuals that we support makes CSUN the largest academic institution-based VITA program in California and the second largest in the nation. Thank you. In fact, it had such impact, CSUN, together with other CSU schools in LA County called the CSU 5, which includes Long Beach, LA, Dominguez Hills, and Pomona, were awarded an additional $344,000 grant from the California Department of Community Services and Development to grow this program last month. Okay. Another recent achievement, Amazon's Alexa division recognized the Nazarian College by awarding us one of the 10 inaugural Alexa Innovation Fellowships for our entrepreneurship program. The only other California universities recognized as such were UC Berkeley and USC. We are in sure good company indeed. So I can go on with many more accolades, but let me turn to the program you're all waiting for without further delay. Today, we welcome senior executives and world-class content experts from two of the best established and most widely respected firms on the globe, IBM and KPMG. These two giants in their respective industries have formed an alliance to revolutionize the practice of accounting and advisory services with a series of cognitive business solutions. Big data, artificial intelligence, blockchain, the Internet of Things, machine learning, smart contracts, process robotics, these things have become impossible to avoid a discussion of these technologies in our popular culture. These technologies are not on some distant horizon anymore. They are here today. In short order, they will permeate every aspect of our lives and our careers. No one will escape their daily reach. The disruption that these cognitive-based innovations will spawn has been compared to the introduction of the steam engine and advent of the internet age. In fact, it'll be even more profound due to how rapidly and how pervasively the landscape will change, including for the very nature of what we call work. This rapid advance presents real challenges to colleges and universities. For good and appropriate reasons, course content and curriculum changes do not happen overnight. To maintain academic integrity, we must respect process so that our pedagogy is not subject to whim or fad. So how do we balance a deliberative and structured process in the face of immediate transformation of entire industries? There are no easy answers or solutions, but we can start by working on our culture. While we deliberate and consider our curriculum, let me suggest just 3 values that we must instill in our students with some urgency. Intellectual curiosity, so that the primacy and the imperative of lifelong learning are inculcated. Flexibility and adaptability, so that change is embraced and not avoided. And intellectual courage, so that we become conversant with complex technical and scientific content, so that we not only become better consumers of that technology, but can become an integral part of changing the business world, rather than being intimidated by it. Programs like today's can help us to foment that cultural change. And I think no one can better do this than our keynote speaker, Steve Canepa, to get us started. Sorry, I was supposed to do that. Steve is the managing director and general manager of IBM's global communications, media, and entertainment industry business. He is responsible for bottom-line results of a $7 billion global organization that delivers IBM's full portfolio of cloud and cognitive solutions to firms in a wide-ranging industry vertical: communications, cable, entertainment, advertising, broadcasting, publishing, satellite, sports, music, games, search, online, I'm tired of just reading those things, and social segments. Steve has grown this business into one of the world's largest providers of solutions and services to those industries, leading a consistent, top-performing IBM team in the process. He serves as an advisor to a wide array of customers and partners regarding transformation in the digital age, including firms in finance, consumer electronics, retail, health, and auto industries. Steve's career has been centered on innovation and highlighted by increasingly global leadership roles in general management, sales, strategy, marketing, consulting, and business development. He's committed to and recognized for building high-performance teams and lasting, trusted relationship with employees, clients, and partners. A long-serving member of IBM's global leadership team, Steve serves on IBM's performance team, global acceleration team, global sales leadership team, and the IBM Industry Academy. He's also IBM's senior location executive in Southern California. Steve is shaping and driving IBM's strategy for video services, cloud, and cognitive solutions, and network virtualizations, including a number of significant acquisitions. Steve has accepted 3 Emmy Awards for innovation. Frost & Sullivan recognized his team as the Digital Media Company of the Year, and he has been named a key industry influencer. Steve has also been an active member of many boards, including Digital Domain. He currently serves on the boards of LA Chambers of Commerce, the Technology Committee of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, which awards the Emmys, USC's Marshall Center for Global Innovation, and of course, CSUN's Nazarian College. He has also served on MusicCast, the Grammy Foundation, Digital Hollywood, and a variety of industry boards. With the commitment to the welfare of children, he was a long-serving member of the boards of the Bogart Pediatric Cancer Research Fund and Junior Achievement of Southern California. Steve has earned 2 BA degrees from UCLA in economics and political science with national honors, and also an MBA in corporate finance from UCLA's Anderson School with highest honors. He has completed executive programs in Wharton School of Financial Management program and at Harvard University's Executive Curriculum on Strategy Formation. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Steve Canepa to the podium.
After that, I think I should just say, in conclusion. So anyway, thank you to the Dean, and congratulations on all the things that CSUN is doing to open up minds and understand how technology is changing the world. And thank you to all of you for taking time out of your schedule today to be with us. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be here, along with KPMG, our partner, and you'll see a panel a little later. I thought what I would do is just start with some observations about what we see happening in the marketplace and how these changes in the marketplace are being impacted by AI. And try to answer the question to a degree on why do we need AI? What role does it play? And what is it exactly? So as you're going through your careers or in your role as a customer or consumer, you can start to recognize it. And then finally, how are we integrating it in business value? And then we'll have a panel later to talk specifically about what we're doing in accounting. Now, I thought I'd bring you back. Anyone remember 2011 when this happened? This is when Watson debuted on national television. Watson is IBM's AI platform. And that night, Watson played against the 2 best Jeopardy players that had ever played the game. One had won the most money, and the other had won the most games. And if you've ever tried to play along with Jeopardy at home, you know it's not easy. So basically, Watson was going to compete with them in a live match. No one knew what would happen. Now, years before this, I'd been involved when our Deep Blue computer played against Garry Kasparov, the Grandmaster. You remember that one? In that instance, though, there's a finite number of moves in chess. It's a large number of moves, but it's a finite number. So it was pretty clear that at some point in time, computer power would get strong enough that a computer would play successfully against a Grandmaster. What was different about this is it was an open-ended question set. They could ask anything, and Watson would have to be prepared to answer. So when Watson debuted that night, there was 200 million pages of information in Watson's memory. And Watson could not be connected to the outside world. That was part of the rules. And so that seemed at the time like an enormous amount of data to work from. But today, I assure you, that's a very small fraction of what Watson has in its memory today. But the way it would work is a question would come on the board, and Watson had to take that question and interpret it. What are they really asking? What are they trying to get at? And then Watson would go into those 200 million pages of information and try to determine what the top 3 possible answers might be. And then Watson would pick the top answer and score it. And then using game theory, because you know in Jeopardy, if you're wrong, you lose money, right? So using game theory, Watson had to determine at that moment in the match, should I answer this question? And all of that had to happen in less than 3 seconds, because that's how long these 2 guys took to control the board. Now, Watson ended up winning that match, if you remember. But what was interesting to me is what happened behind the scenes. So back in 2007, when we signed up to do this match with Sony Pictures Entertainment, we committed to do it live on television. No trial runs, no practice. It was going to be live. And for the IBM brand, that was a pretty big moment, right? So when in 2011, when our scientists and engineers started training Watson, before anyone even knew Watson existed, to the time that Watson played on air in 2011, an amazing thing had happened. Watson had gotten so much better at playing this game that by the time it aired, we knew there was a good chance Watson was going to win, which was important. But what was really important to me, having dealt with the communications and media industry and all of this new data hitting the world, was that learning curve, right? Because the learning curve meant that Watson was actually getting better at the process of playing Jeopardy. So let me flash forward now to a few years later. Anyone see the movie Morgan? Remember Morgan? Came out about a year ago. So I got a call from the team with the executive producers at Fox. They were producing this movie Morgan. And Morgan was going to be this sci-fi action thriller based on artificial intelligence. And somebody in their marketing department came up with a pretty interesting idea. It was, what if Watson watched this movie and then Watson decided how to make a trailer to promote the movie, working in partnership with our editors? And here's what happened.
Its first birthday. It exceeded our wildest expectations.
Nice to meet you, Morgan.
Nice to meet you, Lee. I have a 13-year-old daughter. You don't get to see her much anymore.
Skip, don't go in there, okay?
What?
Don't you go down there, Skip.
Don't be afraid, Amy. I have to go say goodbye to Mother.
Fox approached IBM and they said, well, we have this movie coming out. It's called Morgan. And it's an AI horror thriller. And then what Fox asked was, could Watson analyze the movie and generate a trailer automatically?
As human beings, we're very quick to judge the mood of an individual. Possibly an AI over time might be able to develop those same instincts.
So we thought, let's send Watson to film school.
Morgan was our little breakthrough. It exceeded our wildest expectations. Here you have the whole of the Morgan movie, and you can see where action is taking place at the different moment of the movie. And this is how Watson actually extracted salient moments from Morgan, which we then proposed for making the trailer.
Watson was able to model the scenes visually to determine, was a scene scary? Was it a tender moment? Was there sadness or happiness?
Watson is the tool that's helping arrange the visuals, but it still needs the human element. So then I can come in and just supervise the creative aspect of it.
I don't think AI is any value until it does start to understand and calibrate those emotions for itself.
I think that's asking a deeper question. Will computers be able to create art? Can they create? Period. It's still very difficult to think of how a computer might be capable of original thought, something that's essential in creativity.
Hello, Morgan. Nice to meet you.
In the flesh.
So that trailer that you saw is something that Watson actually picked the slides for and then worked with the editor to compose it. So it brings me to the question, why do we need AI? What is it about business today? What is it about what's happening in the workforce? How's it going to impact all of us as customers or consumers? And importantly, as professionals that are doing different jobs in the marketplace. And I think there's some fundamental things that are shifting in the way that competition happens now in the market. It used to be whether you were a one-person accounting firm, a small business, or a multinational corporation, the process was you would produce products and services, and then you would bring them to market. The reality is today, in business, every day, firms are trying to understand their customer base more and more so that they can stand out from the competition, so that they understand what the customers are trying to target with their products and services really think. And in fact, in surveys we've done, 67% of us, I'd argue even more, we expect our next customer experience to be as good as the best one we've had up till now. So what does that mean? It means the bar is rising constantly. We expect more. We expect companies that are dealing with us now to understand us, to interact with us in a way that makes sense for us, what we care about, to make offers to us that are relevant to what we want. We're seeing this in the advertising industry. You know, this long-held thesis that if the ad is actually relevant to you, you don't mind watching it because it informs you in a way that's relevant. And then finally, if we need to be supported, we want to be supported in a way that helps us. And in fact, we did a recent survey of customers of banks and accounting firms. And 63% of those customers, when asked, what is it that you really would want more from those institutions, said, I want a tailored advice to my exact needs. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, think about this. Every day in the US, 10,000 baby boomers retire. And every time one of them retires, they take with them the cumulative learning that they've had through their whole career. Now, if you're a business operating in a marketplace that's constantly changing, that's a huge drain on your intellectual capital in your business. So how do we protect that so that business continues to move forward and not move backwards? I think there's a couple other really important trends that are happening. The first one is around data. Data in all of its different fidelities. And what I mean by that is, for years, computers were good at structured data, so rows and columns of numbers, like the accounting firm. That's called structured data. In this new vernacular, unstructured data refers to human language, the ability to understand it in all different dialects and languages around the world, and image and audio and video. And I would argue video is becoming the most important at all, for a couple of reasons. First, video takes a lot of data. But video, fundamentally, is becoming the way to transform industries. Think about tailored learning. How many students in the class today have watched a video as part of their curriculum? Think about surveillance in government, right? Video is always there. And video as a data type is being used in things like medical services now. You can see your doctor wherever they happen to be or you happen to be all over the world. The other thing about video that's really powerful is just because of its size and the amount of data it represents. I work with telecommunications companies all over the globe. 70% of the data that crosses their networks now is video, and that's only going to grow. So what we're seeing is a dramatic growth in the amount of data that's available. But the statistic that makes me think a little bit is this one. 90% of the world's data has been produced in the last 2 years. All of time up till now. And in 2 years, we've produced 90%. So what's happening in the real world is data is growing at this incredible rate, at a rate that makes it hard for us to actually get a handle on it, to understand all of it, to use what's relevant, to discard what isn't, and to integrate it together to be able to make really good decisions, whether it's in our personal lives or in business lives. And this isn't new. I have a very strong belief that the one thing that was common in the last generation of platform companies that now impact our lives every single day is that they had one thing in common. They had data at the center of their business model, every single one of them. So what do? All day long, they A/B test with you and everybody else, trying to understand how you respond to things. They target offers to you based on what they know about you because they've attributed you deeply. They personalize services they give to you. They predict your behavior based on your past behaviors. And they make recommendations to you that they have a high probability that you're going to like. And by the way, they make those recommendations to others that have similar attributes like you, and that's how they get the scale in their business models, because they're constantly scaling around these ideas. So in my view, when we talk about the workplace of the future, and we talk about business context and how business value is going to be delivered, it's becoming pretty clear that continuous improvement is going to be one of the cornerstones. And I think for workers of the future, a passion for learning is going to be really critical, because you're going to have to stay abreast of these kinds of developments because they're going to impact not only your personal life, but they're going to impact your profession. Think about all the professions, from sales to marketing, to accounting, to finance, to field support, production, distribution, manufacturing. In each of these functions of the business now, information is being used to help those professionals make better decisions. So what is AI in this context? Kind of, how would we recognize an AI system when we come across it, like our Watson system? I think there's kind of 4 key attributes that make up an AI system. These are pretty common across the board. The first is it has to understand data in all those fidelities I was talking about. Structured data, unstructured data, human language, all the dialects and language around the world, image, audio, and video. So it has to be able to deal with all those different data types. Secondly, it has to come up with ideas or concepts or notions to offer potential answers to questions. And then it has to weigh evidence to understand, is it likely that this answer is better than this one, and why? What is it about that evidence that makes it better? In fact, we just announced a thing called AI OpenScale in the marketplace that allows anyone using these systems, whether they come from IBM or someone else, to look behind the curtain at what evidence the AI system is using so you can start to analyze, are there unintended biases coming in to that decision-making process? And then once it does make a decision, it has to implement the decision, and importantly, it has to measure the outcome. Because in the outcome, it determines the effectiveness of that set of decisions. And what comes from that? That learning I talked about. The ability for these algorithms to get better at what they do over time. And so as you persist data in whatever function you are working in, it's likely that the models you're using are going to get better. We've done a lot of creative things. I've applied it to demand forecasting for theatrical. So in the old days in theaters, they used to use genre mapping and surveys and focus groups to determine who's going to come to my movie. Now we add in social data and all kinds of other data to refine those models to help them avoid when that blockbuster movie doesn't do well. And from that learning then comes the ability for the systems to move into new domains. And for me, though, an important part is today, we're talking about the workplace of the future. We're talking about the skills that are going to be necessary in the workplace. If these systems are going to interact smoothly with human beings, then they have to interact with human beings in a very natural way, seamlessly. So they have to be able to hear audio. They have to be able to see image and video. They have to be able to take speech in and translate it to data that they can then integrate with other data in order to go through that decision-making process. And not to get too technical, but there's some core building blocks that these systems are using. Not unique to IBM, but in general, in the scientific and engineering community. Things like recommendation engines or prediction engines, robotics to automate processes, natural language I talked about, image, audio, video I talked about. The ability to stitch these kind of domains together to create a cohesive system. And in each of these domains, there's lots of research happening in the marketplace now to make each of them more effective. So this is Watson. The way Watson shows up is a set of application programming interfaces, or APIs. And these are available to anyone. In fact, every student in this audience today could go home tonight through our academic initiative that we've done in partnership with CSUN, and you could sign on to Watson. And you could test some of these APIs and see how they work in an application or a program that you're developing. They're very lightweight. The way I think about it is, think about an artist sitting in front of a blank easel. And that artist has a palette of colors. And from that palette of colors, they can paint anything in the world that they want to. Think of these as a palette of APIs that do certain things that can be integrated in with your applications in the use case that you're working on, whatever that use case might be. Now, I've highlighted one of them, Personality Insights. So this one, just as an example, can take a very small sample of someone's writing, a few hundred words, and you feed it into this API, and it begins to distill out what some of the core personality traits, or at least leanings, of that person might be. And if you're targeting a customer, it might give you just a few more attributes that would allow you to do a better job of hitting their interests and help you stand out from the competition in the marketplace. So how else can we apply these? Think about pattern identification. I'll give you a simple example of a football game. If you're watching an offense in a football game, there's patterns that happen. If you're a defensive coordinator, you might want to know what those patterns are so you could recognize that play before it even happens. Or if you're in the marketing department and you like to find images or logos or faces or objects of certain things to target that marketing to a certain fan base or customer base, we can identify those as well. This is what we did this last year at the Masters. Everyone know the Masters plays in the April timeframe. It's probably the kind of the pristine golf match in the world. IBM has had a long sponsorship relationship with the Masters. We do all of the over-the-top for the Masters. So if you watch the Masters on your phone, on your iPad, on your PC, that over-the-top service is being produced by IBM. And this year at the Masters, Watson watched all 4 days of the event. And while Watson was watching the event, every single frame of that event was scored amongst a number of different attributes. The reason that was done is so that we could distill out of the entire match the things that might appeal to certain subsets of the fan base. Let's say we had an active fan base that liked action. So Watson might look for scenes where there's a fist pump, because you know when those putters make their long putts, they tend to get really excited. It would be a marker that Watson could use to compile a set of videos that appeal to that fan base. Or another fan base might like really tense moments in a match. So maybe Watson listens to the audio track and looks for moments when the commentators get really quiet, because it indicates something suspenseful is about to happen. And so we can automate the process of going in and finding that content and supplying it to an editor who can package it up and then ship it over all the various services, OTT, online television, that a consumer might want to subscribe to get an experience that's tailored exactly to what they care about. Now, the important point for me in all of this is not man versus machine. It's not person versus machine. It's human plus Watson, or more generally, human plus AI system. Because the reality is the human brain is good at some very sophisticated things: imagination, compassion, abstraction, generalization. And AI systems are good at the kind of things I've been describing here: getting huge amounts of data, looking for patterns, integrating that data together, and learning from it over and over. So the point here is, if we can marry those human traits with those computer traits, we ought to be able to make better decisions, both as consumers and as professionals working in some function of a business. So now you could think, okay, that makes sense. I can apply that to very rote tasks, things that happen over and over again. I automate them, I make decisions, I get feedback. But think about the other end of the spectrum, all the way at the other end of the spectrum. Creativity, unbounded, hard to describe. What makes someone creative? What makes their creative work effective? So this was a challenge we did with a Grammy Award-winning producer named Alex da Kid. Anyone listen to Alex's music here? Alex has cranked out a number of songs, very, very successful. And I got the opportunity to work in this project with him about the idea that if Watson could take all this data and illuminate it in a way that was relevant to Alex, could we fire his creative energy in such a way to help him produce a better song? And here's what happened.
I found music when I was 19, and it completely changed everything. My perspective, my friends, just the way I looked at the world, and it just made me a different person. It's absolutely everything in my life. I'm Alex da Kid, and I've been told to say I'm a Grammy Award-winning producer. I love understanding human emotions because it's very complex. You know, why people feel the way they feel, what actions they take based on that feeling. My favorite question to ask people is why. I take inspiration from all different types of places, but ultimately it's just from living life.
When we first met Alex, he was interested in exploring culture and music on a deeper, more emotional level.
When we talk about illuminating data, what we mean is that we're visualizing it in a way that we can understand it and relate to it.
Very impressive.
In culture, Watson analyzed millions of lines of text, Wikipedia articles, New York Times front pages, social media, blogs, and more, finding the most pervasive themes and uncovering the way people felt about them. Watson also analyzed the lyrics and composition of over 26,000 top 100 Billboard songs, uncovering hidden patterns in both song structure and emotion.
It's almost like having a million of yourself reading a million books at once, and a million articles, and understanding social media and just conversation in general. I could never do that.
Once Alex began the music-making process, we gave him a prototype of something we're developing, called Watson B. It understands and deconstructs music, and then allows artists to change it based on the moods they want to express.
I always say I don't really play instruments that well. I play the laptop extremely well. Technology is paramount, definitely to my process. And being able to collaborate with Watson, it just took everything to another level. The data from Watson showed me all these heavy emotions millions of people felt around the world. Then I kind of started thinking about heartbreak and just how it's so universal and how everyone goes through it on some level. So it's a very uniting thing.
We were two dumb kids, full of grand ideas.
Hopefully when this is being sung by 60,000 people in a stadium, everyone's singing the same lyric, but they're all singing about something slightly different. But they're all there as a community, kind of feeling each other's pain in a joyous way. Working with Watson's been great because it allowed me to create something that I probably would never have done without him.
It's not easy. It's not easy breaking your heart.
So now we kind of get a sense of what an AI system might be able to do. So the question is, how is it bringing business value? What role is it playing in the workplace of the future? And for each of us, we kind of play two roles. We're a consumer or a customer on one hand, and we're a professional working in some career function on the other. So I thought I'd give you a scenario. Has anyone here ever called a telco or a cable call center? Was it a good experience? Generally not, right? So we've been working with my telco clients around the world for the last 2 years, and 1 billion customers around the world can now access Watson through these call centers. And we've developed 110 intents. Now think of an intent as a journey that a conversation might take. So if you're going to go to Italy on vacation and you wanted to know what your mobile roaming package might be, that could be a journey. So now you call the call center, and Watson takes the call. And Watson's using speech to text to communicate with you. And Watson's trying to figure out, what is the intent of this call? What is the problem I'm trying to solve? Or what's the opportunity to sell this client a new service? And during that, Watson activates another one of those APIs, the tone analyzer. And the tone analyzer tells Watson, whoa, this is a frustrated client. They're pretty agitated. They've been trying to solve this for a while, and they're not making progress. And maybe it's just complex enough or not specific enough that Watson decides, you know what? I'll make a decision. I bring the call center agent in. So Watson transfers that call to the call center agent. But Watson doesn't go away. Watson stays there with the agent. Watson's now listening to the conversation as the agent is navigating this customer sat situation. And Watson's reaching into all the various data sources that are available to feed in real time information to this agent so that they can settle that call as best possible. The objective here is simple. We want you to walk away with a satisfied experience. So now what just happened? That agent just became as good as the best agent they have. And we've raised the bar for the performance of every agent in the business. Now, as we apply those kinds of person plus machine, professional plus machine environments, we can do it in marketing, sales, accounting, finance, field service. How about if that field service agent that showed up at your house knew exactly what problem you had before they even knocked on your door, and they knew exactly how to fix it before they ever entered your house? Be a lot better experience, wouldn't it? So this is how we're seeing AI find its way into everyday products. And as customers or consumers, we're becoming where we take it for granted. We bought the Weather Company a couple years ago. Now, the Weather Company is one of the largest data platforms on the planet. The entire world is instrumented. And of course, over the last 10 days or so, this has been pretty important for us in Southern California and Northern California. And what Watson does all day long is update those weather forecasts. And what Watson does every single day is learn from all the weather forecasts that were done the days before and what actually occurred. Back to that learning point. Or think about navigation now. When we go from point A to point B, we almost expect that we're going to be rerouted because the traffic is going to have changed from the moment we left point A, and we take that as granted that the system is giving us good advice, that they're not steering us off in a direction that's not going to be helpful. What's happening in the workplace is these same capabilities are now being integrated into every industry. So it's not so much the workplace of the future, but of the workplace of today. Watson is working with professionals, doctors, helping them give better diagnosis. In oncology, finding the best protocols and treatments for cancers wherever they happen to be in the world and getting those out broadly to everyone else. In retail, optimizing shopping experiences. In banking, looking for fraud so that they can warn you before someone gets access to your financial resources. And in education, think about personalized learning. So when a teacher steps in front of a classroom, they already know how each student in the classroom learns. And they can have a tutor assigned to each of those students that helps them accelerate in the programs they do well in and help remediate them in the programs that they struggle with. Even in fashion, we did a project where we illuminated the dress for a runway that responded to the enthusiasm of the audience around that specific actress in a way that tailored the experience for those fans. So what I see happening with these systems as we think about the workplace of the future, we think about the skills, I think one thing that's critical is a passion for learning. Because the one thing we know is competition in a marketplace changes every day. And kind of the new imperative for all of us is to stay abreast of some of these changes. But what's also happening is our access to these systems every day is becoming much easier. So I see basically a new class of worker emerging that are providing insights as a service. At the moment they have the highest value. Think about things that would impact your life. Demand forecasting about what's going to happen at an event. Or optimizing on-shelf inventory. So when you know you walk into the store that you normally walk into, that product that you want is going to be there. Or maximizing advertising or optimizing inventory. These kind of real-time insights that drive business forward that work in conjunction with the workers that are assigned to optimize those things in the workplace. So, we're going to have a panel now of some folks from KPMG, and it's been a pleasure for us. We've worked with KPMG now for quite some time on Watson, and of course they have an incredibly distinguished group of individuals that are world-leading in the accounting field. And we've got a number of members of my team that come from Watson and some of the applied areas that we're working on. And they're going to take some of these ideas and technologies that we talked about, and they've gotten questions from the audience, and they're going to give you a little sense of how we're applying it in that field. I hope that was helpful to just give you a sense of where this is at. And the reality is these technologies are evolving every single day. And so we can expect that we're going to see them in better versions integrated into different businesses of all industries over time. Thank you again for being here today, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Steve. That was a terrific and truly eye-opening and great setup. So now we're actually going to move to the panel session. We are going to sort of from the broad issue about workforce of the future and how AI is working to a much more narrow version about how is it done between what's going on with IBM and KPMG. So today, this symposium, by the way, is what is first in what we hope to be a series of programs of the workforce of the future. what we think about as pairing top technology firms with one of their corporate clients who is on a pioneering edge of transforming their industry. So without further ado, we have our panelists. Allow me to introduce them. Luca Marchi, who is sitting on my right, the first one on my right, who is an associate partner in IBM's Center of Competence for Telecommunications, Media, and Entertainment, where he manages client engagements focused on Watson and blockchain. He began his IBM career as an engagement manager for the firm's global business services practice on strategy and transformation in Mexico. He was instrumental in developing the practice's offering and methodology for both Watson and blockchain, and in establishing the Watson ecosystem for a number of industries before assuming an assignment supporting a major Watson strategic partner in Latin America. Prior to IBM, Mr. Marchi was a telco and media industry product manager and a consultant in Europe and South America. He holds an undergraduate degree from University Bocconi in Milan and is a candidate for an MBA at Cambridge Judge Business School in UK. Luca will be actually doing double duty for us as he also serves as a moderator for the panel discussion. The remaining panelists from IBM are Utpal Mangla, who is on my furthest to the right, Vice President and partner in IBM. He leads the firm's Watson AI and blockchain innovation competency in global telecommunications, media, and entertainment industry. Mr. Mangla leads a team of global practitioners providing thought leadership and developing leading-edge digital transformative solutions focused on improving customer experience by using the IBM's Watson technology as an enabler. Utpal and his team are at the forefront of building, piloting, and deploying these solutions for IBM's telecommunications and media clients globally. Mr. Mangla holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from the Pune Institute of Computer Technology and an MBA from Kellogg School of Northwestern. He has participated in several executive programs at top business schools and holds a wide variety of designations in areas of project management, engineering, consulting, and industry design thinking. Next, I think we have right in the middle, Mr. George Kreitler is an account manager for Watson AI strategic partnership at IBM. George's primary responsibility include developing cognitive strategies, leading sales engagements, and crafting solutions directly with the C-suite and senior line of business executive from the largest companies in the world. Both before and since formally joining the Watson team during its formation in 2014, Mr. Kreitler's expertise and focus has been in providing cognitive solutions to leading firms in the financial services industry. Mr. Kreitler earned a BS in economics from Bucknell University and has participated in executive programs at the London School of Economics and Political Science. The two panelists from KPMG are Mr. Arvind Sathi, Director and Architect of the KPMG Global Intelligent Automation, and a faculty member at the University of California, Irvine, where he teaches courses in AI and analytics. Dr. Sathi came to KPMG from IBM after serving as a chief architect of the Watson Platform Partnership for both firms. He has published 4 books and several book chapters on analytics, AI, and data governance. He lectures frequently and holds various patents in the area of analytics. But Dr. Sathi earned his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from the IIT, or Indian Institute of Technology at Kanpur, his MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, an MS in Information Science, and a PhD in Artificial Intelligence from Carnegie Mellon University, where he worked under Nobel Prize winner Dr. Herbert Simon. And completing the list of panelists is Bindya Khurana, Director in Emerging Technologies Risk with KPMG's IT advisory practice, where she designs business-aligned technology strategies and manages transformations. She brings multifaceted experience and skills to clients facing large-scale technology-led transformations, including but not limited to cloud, artificial intelligence, and ERPs. She guides her clients through vendor selections, procurement processes, managing risks during and after implementations. She has over 14 years of experience in providing advice to the CIOs and business leaders globally, and has worked with clients in the US, UK, and Asia. Ms. Khurana earned an MBA from Symbiosis Institute of Telecom Management in Pune, in India. Let's give a warm welcome to our panelists. Before we start, just a quick housekeeping note. I'm holding a card in my hand, and I know most of you were provided this card when you walked in. Please, we have already received lots and lots of questions from all the participants during your registration process that Mr. Machi already has access to. But if you have any more questions, please write your questions on these cards that have been provided to you and pass them to the ushers that are walking past both of those aisles, so that we will then provide those cards to the moderator on stage, Mr. Luca Machi, so that the panelists can address them throughout the program. Luca, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you. Do you have the clicker?
Oh, yes, you have a clicker. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to answer some of your questions. We would like to start with some warm-up questions, fairly easy. The first one maybe for Utpal. I'm sure you are wondering why these three big organizations, CSUN, KPMG, and IBM are here today. So Utpal, why don't you give us a little bit of background on the relationship between IBM and CSUN?
Absolutely. Thanks, Luca. As part of our academic initiative, we partner with a lot of schools and universities worldwide, including some of the big-name schools in the US. However, the Workforce of the Future series that we are doing with CSUN is unique and the only school in North America that we are partnering with. It's regarding creating jobs, looking at jobs, and what the future jobs will look like. It's in our partnership series that we are doing here. The first piece was in February, where we discussed blockchain and the workforce of the future, and this series is more focused on AI and innovation.
And George, since you are in charge of the relationship between KPMG and IBM, can you tell something about the amazing work you have been done together?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I think you're seeing a going on theme here, right, around exponential data growth, creating a challenge, regardless of what industry you're in. Humans don't have the capacity to analyze and interpret information at the pace, at the exponential rate in which data is growing. KPMG came to IBM back in 2015, and they saw that we were a first mover in the space of cognitive and AI technologies. And in this disruptive time, they felt that they needed to be a first mover for us within the accounting practice. And in particular, where they really saw the most value early on was in the audit space. Throughout the entire audit life cycle, there are particular areas where you're dealing with high frequency, low complexity type of activities. And that's really an area where we are, from a maturity perspective, from a technology perspective, where we're most ripe to disrupt and help to automate. So what started as an audit focus quickly expanded into a variety of other areas. KPMG's three largest areas are around audit, tax, and advisory. So across tax, we're working in a number of different domains. And the similar process is throughout a particular domain, say, take research and development, for instance, or meals and entertainment. are there particular areas throughout that process that Watson may be able to help you better, more efficiently analyze the available information you have? And in the R&D space, what's really of interest to us is, we have the ability to work with CFOs of a variety of different companies, but when it comes to our business in the information technology space, whatever they lose as part of their taxes has a direct effect on the research development space ability to spend with us. So through this partnership, we've expanded from audit to tax to even the advisory space. And in the process, what you've seen is KPMG has really developed their own center of competency, where their cognitive labs team that we work with on a daily basis is really a leader across the consulting space, not just tax and audit. So it's a combination of data and the explosion around that, our inability to analyze it without AI. And then what you're seeing, particularly in financial services, is the explosion of regulations, right? And in particular, we dealt with a particular solution. IFRS 16 was an important regulation that came up that required companies to do additional due diligence analysis on their contracts, things that they weren't typically accustomed to. So the thought there was, can we train Watson to understand those contracts, do some of that analysis for us, some of that heavy lifting, so that we can focus on improving efficiencies, on expanding our client base, et cetera. So it's really been a productive relationship where what started in audit has expanded across, and I think we're going to show you a couple of videos that deep dive a few of the areas where we've seen a lot of value on both sides.
And why don't we go with the first video? Can we launch the video, please?
Companies who increase their investment in research activities to improve or expand their business can be rewarded for their research and development, or R&D, activities through a U.S. income tax subsidy in the form of an income tax credit. Companies that meet the eligibility to claim these income tax credit subsidies may reap sizable benefits, including reduced income taxes, enhanced cash flow, and increased financial statement earnings. Yet the process for maximizing R&D credit subsidies requires companies to expend significant resources to comply with the complete tax rules. Then, volumes of documents and contracts need to be organized and analyzed to support the R&D projects. That is, until now. As KPMG has built the first cognitive platform with IBM Watson, the combination of KPMG's dedicated research credit services team and powerful cognitive platform with Watson enables us to increase the volume and success in capturing R&D tax credit subsidies. KPMG can upload all of the relevant documents and ingest them into Watson to identify projects eligible for R&D credit subsidies. The result is a more robust ability to identify qualified R&D activities eligible for the credit subsidy. Also, the higher quality documentation supporting the R&D credit subsidy should help increase the success of credit subsidy retention upon IRS audit and minimize business disruption so your key employees involved in R&D activities can stay focused on more strategic, value-added activities. This is how KPMG is leading the way in seizing new opportunities, embracing disruption, and helping tax drive greater value. This is Tax Reimagined.
So these answers one of the questions that many of you asked: what's the impact of AI on accounting and on taxes? But Arvind, since you were crucial in the development of this application, can you tell us something more about the process that you have to go through to develop something this successful with AI?
Yeah, this video that you just saw is a great example of where we started looking at tax as an area, and we said, where is it that AI can actually help? Now, tax is a very complicated topic because what we all rely on as tax consultants is what we call the legal tax hierarchy. We have Congress that establishes what we put into the taxes. IRS then explains how corporations can use it. And then courts decide whether the entire process is fair and is following the constitutional boundaries that have been set. As you know, the courts do not always have the same opinion, so you could have multiple circuit judges with multiple opinions. What comes out in the process is lots and lots of documentation, all the way from Congress to IRS to legal cases, which have to be kept in the environment for a tax consultant to be able to understand which particular situations would be applicable to a particular client situation. Now, R&D is one of those areas which is very complex from that perspective because there is a 4-part test that IRS prescribes, and that process is not easy because we have to take all the client data, we have to apply it against all these known legal court cases, and come back to a judgment. Now, this is where AI helps because the tax professional who is very busy can take, instead of trying to do very simple searches, they can apply AI to do a lot more context-sensitive, context-specific way of assembling all the information, and then, based on that, make their judgments. This is the process that we went through, not just for this application, but for many, where we looked for how the large number of velocity of data that's coming to us, the complexity of the regulations, and the large volumes of data sets that have to be analyzed in a very short time. And we are basically increasing the ability of a professional to be able to handle that in a short time.
Thank you. And Bindya, can you tell us something about the skills that the different professionals participating in such a project need to have and apply to the development?
I think one of the first things that we need to consider is, as a professional, is our ability to trust the technology, use it, and challenge it. The technology is as good as the business problem that you feed into it, so the ability of a professional to really articulate the business problem they are facing in which a technology or AI can be relevant is very important. The other area that, as Steve mentioned, is ability to learn quickly and have a great learning curve. One of the key terms we use in KPMG is student of the firm and student of the client. So no matter what level you are at KPMG, you're always a student of the tool that we're using at a client, methodology that we're using at a client. So you're always learning. So being open to learning and having that smart learning curve is very important. And the third area that I see is very important in terms of skill set is consensus building. I know it's a soft skill, but one of the key areas that we see tools and use of technologies fail is when a human or a professional is not ready to use it. So having an ability to build consensus amongst the teams, lead them in the direction, and ability to trust the tool, I believe is very important as well. So I would say those three are key skills that are required when an organization is trying to implement AI to bring in efficiencies.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe that in the interest of time, we could skip the second video. We have so many interesting questions that I would like to be answered. Arvind, I think this is for you. Many students actually asked, how soon should universities include data science or AI into their curriculums, not necessarily in STEM departments, but also in accounting and business?
Actually, that's a very good question, and it's very close to my passion area. So at University of California, Irvine, we worked on exactly that idea. We started a program as a master's level program, 1 year long, on master's in data scientists. And what was interesting was that the first year of that program that we started, we found a large number of accounting professionals who wanted to get into the program. So we had a lot of cross working between the Masters of Accounting and the Masters of Data Science, where we were trying to learn it together. And through that process, we have begun to realize, From that process, we have begun to realize that there is a fair amount of work that we have to do in creating the curriculum and creating the programs so that accounting professionals can fully understand the impact of data science. So a lot of course material that we prepare, the case studies that we prepare, are all geared towards how accounting professionals can better understand how to take the data into account. One of the key areas that I'm very much into working is unstructured data, because a lot of what accountants work is semi-structured or unstructured data, whether it is in the form of documents or also in the form of spreadsheets, where accountants are fairly creative. We use spreadsheets a lot in not just storing structured data, but taking any kind of unstructured data and taking the structure of that spreadsheet and putting it in there. Analyzing that kind of data, especially when you have spreadsheets created by thousands of people in KPMG kind of environment, is a fairly interesting challenge.
Awesome. Looking a little bit more in long term, what kind of skills should students like this one learn in their current courses in order to be competitive in the future labor market? I don't know, Bindya, do you want to answer? Maybe Utpal, you can.
Yeah, let me take a first shot at it, and then Bindya can take it. The skill sets of the future, I would categorize it into 3 buckets, if you will. The first is industry knowledge. Depending on which area of the business, which industry you're working on, you need to develop over a period of time deep industry skills. The second area becomes a specialized skill, which technically can be called a bit of a service line skill. It can be in terms of accounting, financial, whatever particular masters or specialization you're getting involved in. And then the third one is deep knowledge, deep or a certain amount of knowledge of technology, for example, data, AI, blockchain, the technologies, because these things are all linking together, and there is significant synergy across each and every industry from a service line standpoint as well as technology standpoint.
One of the areas that I want to say, as a student, this is a very exciting time. When you're entering, if I remember about 18 years ago, when I was entering the workforce, I spent first few years doing very mundane tasks. If you think of that, now technology is taking care of those. So what you're doing in first year as a professional is really analyzing the information and making some really important and key decisions for managers above you, for your supervisors. Right? I find that very exciting, especially from the era that I come from. Right? For first 3 years, what we were doing was very different than what you would be doing when you enter the workforce. So a key skill set, I would say, is having, as again Steve mentioned, insights, reading the information and using the insights to present to your supervisor and making that information available for key decision making. So that's a very, very important skill, along with the business knowledge that you'll bring as the technology grows, and ability to trust and use the technology. We all are very adept at using our smartphones. So I don't see that as a challenge. However, as curriculums add tools like Watson, and more understanding of artificial intelligence, robotics, cloud, blockchain, so you're having these conversations when you enter the professional world. That differentiates you when you're sitting in an interview, and you can talk these technologies in a business term to your interviewer.
Notion that technology and automation will take away jobs. The way I look at it is these are very, very exciting times. And if you embrace technology and automation, it complements your skills. So instead of looking at it on the downside, there are significant upsides of embracing these technologies, because this will help improve your skills and your market skills into the jobs of the future.
Okay, I was keeping this question for later, but I need to jump on what you just said. We really received a lot of questions about the role of AI and automation in basically the substitution of human labor, and what are the impacts for society, what are the impacts for the workforce, not necessarily the high-skilled one. So will more jobs be created than those that are being substituted? Arvind, you have an opinion about that?
Let me take this one. This is very interesting that if I look back, 1970s, there were these typing pools in every major city. People went downtown, and they sat in a typing pool, and they spent the whole day typing. How many of those typing pools are there today? So what is interesting is that each movement of a technology, in this case personal computers, bring about a change that changes the way we all work. When I was in my undergrad, we were dealing with slide rules and calculators. So we learned how to do that, but we did not learn how to apply those things just in the form of the mechanics of the slide rules. We learned underlying concepts. And what we are beginning to see today is exactly the same thing happening to a number of technologies that were created in 1980s and 90s. Now we are seeing kind of the next level, where we are seeing the technology, again, revolutionizing certain white-collar jobs. At KPMG today, we have thousands of people whose job, day in, day out, is to go and read a contract. When you get a new regulation like IFRS, and the international body is coming up with a new regulation where they would like you to read every contract. We don't have enough people to read those many contracts. It takes us about 2 hours to read a real estate contract, while you can have an AI technology which can take those contracts, pull from there the relevant paragraphs, give it to an individual, and then from there onwards they can do the real task, which is to look at the impact of that contract on the balance sheet, which is the real job that an accountant has to do. So what we are really talking about here are amplifiers. These are the cognitive amplifiers that we are building over time. And each round, we get an amplifier that amplifies certain skills that were mundane, that were mechanical. How many of us spend a lot of time working on trial balances? Well, right now, that process is getting more and more automated. So what we see in each era is the mundane gets done a lot more by machines, and humans to do the real fun stuff, which is the creative work.
India, do you have something to add?
One of the things that I would say is no matter what study you look at, globally, there is an aging workforce, and there is a need for more employees. I mean, most of the organizations that I work with, most of my clients, one of the key challenge I hear from them is they just can't find the right people. It's not that they don't have jobs, it's they can't find the right people. So that's one of the things to remember. The jobs are not going away. The jobs that you're going to do are going to become different. Hence, being ready for those jobs is one of the most important things. I also lead the recruitment effort for our firm, KPMG, and CSUN is one of the colleges that we come to year on year and find the best talent. But one of the challenges that I hear from our interviewers from different practices is, where do we find the right skill set, or how do we work with the colleges to make sure that the skill set we are hiring is ready and deployable and productive on day one? And hence, I believe that these academic partnerships that we are trying to make to ensure that the skill set is ready and the people are ready to come to the workforce and be productive is very important.
And of course, this audience is very interested in understanding how AI will impact the jobs in accounting and finance. George, do you have an opinion about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think as you look at areas where AI is really disrupting and where we're continuing to see enhancements, it's really around improving the underlying algorithms that are in place, whether it's approving different loans or mortgages. That tends to be, that analysis tends to be done very well by AI systems. ultimately, you as employees will have to make that final review and make sure that these systems are operating in the right manner. And Steve alluded to this early on, but we are very much focused on improving trust and transparency across these different systems. So that when you're building in machine learning models to any different process flow, you're doing so in a very transparent way. So we're very focused on things like bias detection. Just to give you some examples, right? Are your particular loans being accepted from a particular demographic but not by others? In the HR space, are you providing job descriptions that only particular genders relate to? Are you using skills bias in certain ways? So I think there's a number of different applicable aspects of it, but ultimately humans will play that sort of final review when it comes to approving or disproving different loans or mortgages.
I would also like to hear from our KPMG speakers about which areas of accountings maybe are more at risk of becoming obsolete, or where AI can really augment the capabilities of humans.
So I'll take some examples from one of the clients that I'm working on right now. It's one of the largest automaker in the United States. And if I were to look at their financial organization or their accountants, right, a few years ago, their key job was to reconcile numbers from one system to another, or from dealers to their own internal inventory systems. And they weren't necessarily really looking at forecasts and making decisions like what models do we need ready, right? Not that that information was not coming to them, it's just they didn't have tools to analyze that information because most of their time was being spent in reconciling numbers. With tools like AI taking over that mundane task of monthly reconciliations, control compliance, they are really focused on making value-added decisions for the controller, for the CFO, or for the CEO in saying, hey, this year, these are the sales number we can project, and hence these are the numbers that we need to have in inventory, or this is how we can better treat our dealers, this is how we can better take care of our compliance, which I think is a tremendous change in the job that a financial organization was doing. Coming to the audit side, which is the role that we play for that account, our staff was primarily focused on ticking and tying samples, right? Let's look at what dealer said which car they received, and let's look at what company said revenue they recognized. But with the use of tools that we've built with the help of IBM and in using AI, our staff is now really focused on exceptions and really focusing on, is the organization compliant, right? Because when you're looking at 25, 50 samples, whatever be the methodology, and basically manually looking at the compliance, it's very hard to look at the exceptions and very hard to look at a broader picture. But as an auditor, we are doing a better, efficient audit where we are truly focusing on exceptions and analyzing the root cause. The point is not to say, okay, you have one exception and that becomes a deficiency and hence your control environment is not compliant. But the point is really as an auditor to take a look from stakeholders' perspective and say, overall, is company doing a good job of complying to the controls? Is company doing a good job in projecting their revenue or stating their revenue on their financial statements? I think the quality of audit that we are doing has improved tremendously, and with more and more AI coming into picture, we see it's going to change completely. And that's why I say that when you join us today, and the type of work that you're going to do versus what I did 17 years ago is very exciting.
Utpal, I have a question for you. Since
I just wanted to make a comment on that. So if there is a thought process out there that, as Bindia mentioned, a lot of these things are getting automated, if someone over there is thinking that's reducing the number of jobs, that's actually incorrect, because the workforce is getting redeployed into more high-quality stuff. For example, focus on fraud prevention, fraud mitigation did not exist, or it was very difficult to do. A lot of the workforce is now moving over there in terms of looking at patterns, in terms of looking and understanding patterns. And as machine language is able to create these models, you need humans to make those final decisions. So it's not that the workforce is reducing, it's just that the workforce needs to be reskilled to focus on more critical functions.
And Utpal, I want to refer to something that George mentioned. It's bias in some of the models. It's clear to everybody that artificial intelligence may pose some ethical issues. So how are companies facing these issues? What are they doing in order to play it fair when it comes to machine learning?
I think George gave a very good example, so I'll just extend on that example. I mean, there are many examples, but I'll just take the example that George mentioned about, getting your, when you're looking for insurance or basically applying for insurance, sometimes you get rejected. Sometimes there are certain biases built into this based on gender, race, location where you are. Now, sometimes you need biases because it can be a positive bias, but in many situations, there are a lot of these things which are inherently built into the model. And so the technologies now are looking at these biases, opening those up so that you can understand what's going on, and then you can fix it in the right direction, if you will.
Arvind, I'm sure you have a lot to share about this.
Yeah, one of the things I do want to talk about is the role of governance. So there is a misnomer in the industry that as a data scientist, I can get a lot of data, I can use machine learning, and a black box is going to replace a human. Well, famous last words. In KPMG, for example, we have the 4I process. I do not know how many of you have heard this, but basically 4I process is all about being able to review and make sure that the decisions that are being made have been gone through a repeated set of fairly well orchestrated review process, so that the final decision that comes out that gets a signature from the partner has the validity and has got the wealth of understanding that a company like KPMG has. Now, that kind of a process is very important when we come to an AI system, because we have to replicate that entire process. So the tax video that you saw on R&D, one of the biggest things that we did there was to employ a process whereby anyone can come with a proposed change where they can find some new facts, but how you go from there to actually incorporating it into the algorithms and how you utilize it in the actual systems is a well-orchestrated process that goes through a series of review checks to make sure that what we are placing it in there is consistent with how we would like to do it. And that's where the governance is a key concept. Many of you may have seen the Zuckerberg Senate grilling that happened earlier this year. And that was a very good example of a situation where monetization kind of went a little haywire with Cambridge Analytica and how the data got misused. This is where the governance can play havoc to a particular organization. And this is where we need to make sure that we, as accountants, define the right processes for doing that governance.
Okay. I really like this question because it's like a real-life question, and I hope this person is here in the audience so he or she can get your answer, and this is for the whole panel. This person wrote, "My role is managing a centralized team of 12 motivated finance members, and I'm being asked to try to identify ways we can use AI, like technologies or bots, to streamline processes. How do I generate these? So how should somebody approach AI in order to improve business, their own business?"
You want me to take it? Bots are very interesting. They can be used in a very good way, And they can also be used in a very poor way, where they end up automating something in a very inflexible way, and they never get changed. So we have to be careful on how we streamline those processes. When we have a manual process, along with the manual process comes the flexibility, the organics, the ability to change. Bots, unfortunately, bring with them the inflexibility. Unless properly assembled, they can become your deterrent to change. And I've seen many situations where we took a process, we replicated it with screen scraping software, where there was a piece of software that learned how people were doing it. And then after that, as the software changed in the background, these systems could not be changed because the people who built it in the first place were gone. The expertise was gone. And now we had a situation where the systems in the back could not be changed because there was a bot that was very inflexible. So the moral of the story is, with the bot, bring the organization, bring the ability to change, build the ability to transform. Otherwise, you're going to see that bot working with you for the next 20 years.
If I could just add, I think that it's important to look holistically at the entire process of your sort of day-to-day activity. So what you and your team work on, and then really pinpoint the different areas where you see real inefficiencies. And that could involve, a particular process stopping, you needing to spend time doing additional analysis, you needing to interact with other folks to collect information. So those are just sort of examples of different inefficiencies. I'll give you an example just from real life. We worked with an insurance provider that got a large number of inquiries with regards to adding and removing drivers from particular insurance policies. So that front-end interaction where a customer sends an email, someone has to look at it, process it, bring it down, start the process, that was a huge inefficiency. So now when you interact and send an email to this insurance company, you interact directly with Watson. Watson understands that the intent behind your email is adding to a policy, modifying a policy, removing from a policy, et cetera, and then understands within the email if you've provided the right information, right? You can write this in any variety of different ways. This person lives at X, Y, and Z address, their VIN number is, et cetera. Watson's able to understand that, structure it for you, and start that process so that you, as an insurance adjuster, can really just monitor that. So just an example there where you're seeing high frequency, low complexity type of interactions and analysis that can be very easily automated with cognitive.
Yeah, just to add on to that, to what George and Arvind said, do not start with a technology as a solution. Understand the business problem, look at the business processes, trying to optimize it. There is a very famous terminology from a design thinking sessions. Conduct that within your team. And bot is very common, it's very popular, but it's just one of the many pieces of the AI technology. In fact, in many of the business process optimization, you start with automation, intelligent automation, robotic automation, and then move on to cognitive automation. Bots is just one of the many ways to solve a problem. It is not the be-all. There are many other ways to proceed. And in fact, even if you start with bot, you evolve to the next level where the more benefits come in after a certain period of time.
Really interesting things of working with a company like KPMG, where they deal with clients on a day-to-day basis that are experiencing particular inefficiencies, and they bring out transformative solutions, right? They don't take a technology-centric focus. And in phase one, just like Utpal was saying, You may just be sort of sprinkling in different areas where different AI technologies. You may start with looking at traditional analytics or robotic process automation before you get real value from cognitive systems.
Good. So we have 10 minutes left, more or less, so last couple of questions to close. There's a lot of interest about technology. Utpal and I and Steve also, we were here earlier this year in February to talk about blockchain. So how do blockchain and AI can work together, and especially in finance, how they can impact the industry?
Okay. I can take it, but let Arvind respond from a finance standpoint, accounting standpoint. That might be more useful.
Right. So yeah, let me start from thinking about how blockchain applies to kind of a distributed accounting environment. I look at blockchain as a distributed database technology that is essentially my ability to build a hyperledger where I have my database and my supplier has a database, and we can all work together to make sure that we have trusted data dealing with each other. One of the key things that we are beginning to find is that there's a concept of smart contracts that is underlying these kind of transactions. Transactions happen in the context of an agreement that has been in place and its ability to execute those contracts. So what we are finding is that AI and blockchain work hand in hand, whereby the decision making on how the smart contract gets applied, how manual contracts get converted into smart contracts, is essentially the domain of AI, where we have to kind of bring down the decision making to a level that the smart contracts can now hold responsibility for doing those transactions. And then blockchain can record the end result of that, and they become the keepers of the records on how the transactions are taking place. This is specifically true not just for very simple accounting pieces, but also on how goods get exchanged, how quality gets delivered. So a number of systems that are being built, they're taking the notion of blockchain from just a set of currency and numbers to a number of other areas where blockchain could be equally useful, where smart contract and blockchain work together hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very common, popular use case across the industries where AI and blockchain are combining together. So from a procurement standpoint, let's say for a large organization which has many procurement vendors, you can basically ensure there's trust, transparency, and no leakage, if you will, by using blockchain technology. And then the documents, all kinds of contractual documents can be then handled through AI. So it's a very popular combination of AI and blockchain in this particular use case across all the industries. It's proven, and the companies are moving into this direction. A lot of the reputed companies, Maersk, Walmart, et cetera, are all moving into these directions. In fact, in the telecommunication space, the contracts from a procurement standpoint are also now being handled through blockchain and AI technologies used for reading those contracts.
Okay, I have another question which is very close to a real-life scenario, and I think it's very important to give such a young audience an outlook into what real life looks when you work. So this person asks, will Watson allow the workforce of the future to essentially work remotely at home or at the firm's local office without needing to travel a lot? Is that true? Is it worth? Bindya, maybe you are very well positioned to answer this.
I believe in general, if you compare a few years ago to today, the workforce is a lot more mobile, a lot more remote. And what has enabled all of it is technology. If I were, again, to compare when we had staff joining us and they asking us to work from home even 5 years ago, that was unthinkable. Right? Because you knew that probably internet was not as reliable. We don't know whether the person is really working or not. Again, a real-life manager example, right? I don't know if my staff's working or not. But with onset of technology, that's become very easy. You're doing more and more Skype calls, you're doing more and more WebEx sessions. Most of my clients are actually based all over the world. But at the same time, you're considering environmental impact of traveling so much, because that's another one of the areas that we as KPMG believe in. So we are trying to reduce our carbon footprint, and hence, a lot of our workforce is remote. And as the technology matures, as we use more tools enabled by AI, by blockchain, if I take a simple example, right now you have to go to DMV to get your license. But enabled by blockchain in next few years, I don't see why we would have to go and stand in queues to get a license, right? And you can apply exactly the same thing to your work. If you can get the work done more efficiently sitting at home, I don't see why your managers would ever question that.
I'm going to add something very interesting from KPMG. So one of the most common questions that we get asked during recruitment time is, how much is the percentage of travel? Because a lot of people, young, they're starting careers, starting a life. Sometimes they like to travel, sometimes they don't. I was actually quite surprised to see that the statistics that we collected in my group was 13% travel, not 30, but 13% travel for the consultants. And that was actually quite interesting, because, Bindiya, I don't think 10 years ago we could have used that kind of a number. This is a very new way in which KPMG is now working, where a lot of the work can be done in your home office, so why travel in that situation?
If I can add something, I really would like to answer this. Especially for somebody young that approaches the workforce, I think it's very important to be there and travel. Soft skills, interpersonal relationship, ability to talk to clients and to lead are something that it's very difficult. It will be disrupted by technology. So it's something that you need to, train, and you need to apply energy on. And I don't recommend to work from home too much in the beginning of the career.
Yeah, I think one of the, so we at KPMG do a lot of exit interviews, or stay interviews, as you might call them now as well. And one of the key reasons we've heard people leave is they don't feel integrated with the team, right? So we do these yearly annual surveys on, what can we do to better integrate you, and the thing is team activities. Right? So while working remote is great, having that team integration is important as well. I would say finding the right balance for an employer on what works as a large team or a small team of remote working and on-site working would be, something to think about.
I would add on to that, yes, a lot of the work can happen remote. In many situations, you even don't need to come to the office. But I would also say that in terms of some of the research and science that's coming out, innovation is happening more in an agile environment. And so it's very critical to work collaboratively, and face-to-face co-location is going a long way in terms of creating innovation. If you look globally, even the companies where the innovation happens are in very small pockets or in very small hubs. I mean, Silicon Valley is a good example. Cambridge, Massachusetts is where all of the pharmaceutical companies are co-located. A lot of the innovation in technology, in terms of telecom, media, and entertainment companies are happening in a very small strip, which is in Tel Aviv and Haifa, because of co-location of a lot of these companies. So working in an agile environment is very critical for fostering innovation. Now, the very next logical question would be, well, but we have a global workforce, and so how can we operate in an agile environment when some people are in California, and let's say some people are in Israel or India? And so the concept that's coming up is something called distributed agile, where stand-ups are happening through video, Skype technology to foster innovation.
You're almost... Actually, we are done. Just one question. Did Watson Did Watson create the slides? Unfortunately not, but hopefully soon we will be there. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Luca, and the panelists. Thank you. That was a great discussion, but I'll ask you to stay on for the moment. That was illuminating and insightful. Thank you all, by the way, for that. At this point, by the way, I'd like to bring Mr. Steve Canepa back to the stage. We have a small token of appreciation. Thank you. So another round of applause for all our
Thank you.
speakers and panelists.
Appreciate it.
So before we close, I wanted to thank our keynote speakers, Mr. Canepa, and all our panelists. And I wanted to also thank you for your attendance here today. But there are a few people I wanted to personally thank who actually was instrumental in putting this together. I'm just the one standing in front. So I wanted to thank Bob Sheridan, the Managing Director of our Center for Career Education and Professional Development, Jordan Hilo, the one who's been running around. Where's Jordan? They're hiding. And Leila Saad, my communications specialist. We cannot do much without them. Finally, by the way, we would like to invite you all for a reception in the foyer of the Soraya. Please enjoy the food and networking, and our panelists and keynote speaker will join you in just about 2 minutes. We want to take some pictures, and then we'll be there. Thank you all for attending. Appreciate it.